Hello and welcome back to my channel where I like to have fun with all things beauty while being critical about what I accept into my collection. Today I am doing a Black Friday and Sephora haul. So what that really means is I had originally wanted to do two separate videos, but honestly time just kind of got away from me. It is already the evening of Tuesday before Thanksgiving, so my main goal was to get the Sephora haul done and sort of buttoned up because, well, a few things. Number one is every item here is sold at its own retailer, and they are all having their own sales. So, for example, I picked up the Nars foundation. Nars is having their own sale, so while I'm reviewing it as a Sephora purchase, it's more important when it comes to all of these brands having their own sales and having those reviews up before Black Friday. Another reason is Sephora itself is having another coupon coming up where you can get 25% off all of these products that I'm mentioning here. There is a limit on that. That is the Klarna coupon. So they did this last year and maybe the year before that as well, where it's a one-time use coupon for 25% off and you do have to pay through Klarna or Afterpay. The reason I find that acceptable is because you can pay it all at once. So even though you're technically using Klarna, you're not forced to pay in installments because I don't do that. I don't mess with that. I don't use credit cards for the same reason. I don't do any spending on credit, even if there's zero interest, even if it's just installments and you're paying zero interest, I don't care. I don't do it. Because I feel like once I cross that line, I just have extra stuff to worry about. And I prefer to, I'm somebody with anxiety. I have enough things going on in my head at baseline that I don't need to add other things to worry about and have hanging over my head. So there's no bill to pay that I need to remember. There's no concern if I never buy anything on credit. So I am not a proponent of using Klarna or Afterpay. But in this instance, and I tried it last year, no strings attached. You just pay it all at once and that's it. Move on with your life. It's not an account that you have to keep open or active or anything like that. So for that reason, I do really like that coupon. It does have a limit. So the limit, I believe, is $50 back, which means that's a $200 spend. So it's not as good as the 20% off with no limit, I guess, but at least after the Sephora sale, I don't need $200 worth of anything from Sephora, so I'm perfectly fine with that being the limit. That and the more expensive things at Sephora, like fragrance, I don't think fragrance is best purchased at Sephora. I sort of went down a rabbit hole with fragrance recently because my husband's really into designer fragrances. And from everything I could tell, big box stores are just not the way to go. Macy's, Neiman Marcus, Nordstrom, none of those places are where I'm going to choose to buy my really expensive fragrances. I think Sephora's fine for cheaper fragrances. I get Commodity at Sephora and I love that perfume and I think that's fine, but by and large, I don't think any of the really expensive fragrances, it's a good idea to buy it that way anyway. So outside of that and maybe like Dyson hair tools, everything is under $200. So I think that 20% off coupon is perfectly fine. That's coming up on December 2nd. And obviously this whole week at Sephora, they're having certain items 30% off. I scanned that. I didn't think I saw anything that exciting, but they do have some good brands like Pat McGrath happening on Thursday, so on Thanksgiving itself. And anyway, there still might be another 20% off coupon that doesn't have any exclusions or limits, and I'm not sure when that would be coming, but between the Sephora sales and all of the individual retailer sales, I did really want to break this down and talk about what I thought was worth it. So I am in editing mode here, but I just wanted to pop back in and say that the one exception to picking up unnecessary makeup and skincare for myself, like way before Black Friday happens, I always really look at devices. I am definitely of the mindset that skincare is only worth it to a point. I think the biggest thing that helped me save money in my skincare purchases was just learning about the ingredients. Once I had a good idea of what I was looking at when I looked at products, I was less likely to be swayed by marketing. Like, especially when people are talking about like exosomes or a new peptide that's supposed to change your life or growth factors or any of those things that are sort of harder to nail down. It's not like a simple, straightforward niacinamide. They're a little bit more complex. But once I sort of understood how skin worked, the Dalton rule, what's actually going to get into my skin, that kind of thing, it was easier for me to discern what was and wasn't worth it. That doesn't mean I never splurge. Like, cosmetic elegance is a thing, skin soothing is a thing, wearing well under makeup matters. You know, there is definitely a time and a place for me to splurge on nice skincare, but I am no longer taken by the like $500 cell rejuvenating magic in a bottle nonsense that used to get to me when I was earlier on in my skincare journey. I understand now what skincare can and can't do. So I have my must-haves, but none of them need to be expensive. What I think can make more of a long-term difference are, well, procedures, obviously, but besides that, devices like red light. There are a number of devices on the market, and I always like to try something as long as it's within reason. Like this year, I'm trying the Medicube Booster Pro. I don't think the technology necessarily warrants that at $400, but it's on sale for $150 at Amazon right now. So for that price point, I think it's fun to experiment with a device like that. But where I think my money is better spent is something as vetted as red light therapy. That has a lot more data, so I feel much better recommending something like that. Currently, I have 2 red light devices. So I have a mask and a panel. I have a mask from Omnilux and I have a Mito red light panel. I don't actually use the panel. I got it in 2020 when I thought that I was suddenly going to be like treating my whole body. That never really happened, but I do use my mask every other day religiously without fail. So I went with Omnilux because early on in these devices, I felt like Omnilux had the best specs and the most transparent data behind it. A couple years ago, they introduced another wavelength, so 1072 near infrared. They added to a mask that they were marketing for men because it can get deeper into the skin. When that mask first came out, like everybody else, I was like, well, if it can work on men, what can it do for women? But nobody really wanted to say. Of course, they were never going to say, don't buy this mask if you're a woman, because they want to sell masks. And they also didn't want to say, throw the mask that you already spent like $500 on is useless, because that would not make people like me who invested in a mask feel good. But whatever. I knew that that new wavelength was out there, so I was watching it in my peripheral. Since then, Current Body has come out with a mask. So it's actually a mask and they do an under the chin strap, which I really love. So I like the design of the mask a little bit better, but beyond that, they've included 16 bulbs that have the 1072 near infrared, and they're strategically placed around the eyes and around the mouth. So not only do they have the newer technology, but they have more bulbs than the Omnilux mask in the new wavelength. So in my opinion, that makes this mask a good value. Like with all technology, I would say there's a good chance that they're all doing this next year. So like this time next year, all of these masks could come with this new wavelength standard. But right now, it's just Current Body. So I'm on the fence. On one hand, I feel like if you don't have a mask already, that would be the one I would say to get. On the other hand, if you're like me and you do have a mask, you might be better off waiting to whatever's coming out next year, because they're constantly working on this and making these masks better. So even though I did decide to go ahead and buy one because I want to see if I like it better than my Omnilux, I don't necessarily think that that's the smartest decision. So I did want to mention it because right now you can save almost $100. I think like 93 something. Alice in the Rabbit Hole has a code, so does Penn Smith, and a bunch of people that talk about these masks have discount codes for the 20% off. I know Current Body has said that's going to be the best discount. That's the best discount I've seen. If you're going to do red light therapy, I don't recommend spending less than that, because you really want to go with a company that tests their products to ensure that they have these wavelengths and that the light bulbs are all calibrated properly. Otherwise, you're wasting your time. So that would be my recommendation. If, like me, you do take Black Friday to always get one big item like that per year, that's the thing that I bought this year. That's the thing that I think makes the most sense to invest in. But again, they will be on sale next year, and who knows, next year we could have even more technology available to us. So as with everything, once Cyber Monday passes, it's not like game over. Like, innovation doesn't stop, sales do not stop. So don't feel pressured, but that is just the information that I took into consideration this time around for the devices that I was looking into personally. One thing that I also wanted to talk about in this video is just that this time of year can feel quite overwhelming. Like I touched on earlier, I do struggle with anxiety and definitely holiday anxiety and feeling bombarded like every time I go on Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, anywhere I go, I feel like I'm being bombarded with commercials and it's intense. And there is definitely a big part of me that just wants to put a wall up and say, I'm not shopping. I am not participating in this late stage capitalism hellscape that we're all living in and being forced to participate. I'm not doing any of it. And I have done that in the past. In years past, I have actually decided that I'm not partaking because it is too much to sort through. However, as I've gotten older and as I've had to buy more gifts for other people, I have decided that for me personally, I look at Black Friday and Cyber Monday as my excuse to get my Christmas shopping out of the way. Because I have made that choice, I really try to be strategic and I try to go into these next few weeks with a game plan, because otherwise it's just too much. If I'm looking for stuff for myself, I would just drown in the sea of possibilities, you know? Every once in a while, I do have to take a step back and remove myself and realize that I already have everything I need. You know, when the Sephora sale happened, I re-upped on all of my staple products. So my Holy Grail foundation, my concealers, those are like the only two makeup items that I ever finish. But I did the same with skincare. I went through and I made sure that I'm stocked up for skincare for the next few months. And I've learned the hard way not to buy backups because I changed my mind, you know? I can change my mind. And the only thing that I won't change my mind about is my prescription tretinoin. Everything else is flexible. So I don't buy backups of skincare. I do use Black Friday to get enough for the foreseeable future, but I don't go beyond that. So I have taken care of that already. Once I take that out of the equation, I can sort of block some of the noise out. Like if I see a new Armani lipstick that's suddenly 50% off, I don't need to agonize over whether they have a shade for me. I'm just not going to look at them at all because I don't need lipstick just because it's 50% off. You know, that kind of thing. I struggle more when it comes to indie eyeshadow in terms of being tempted, but this year especially, I have too much eyeshadow. I'm drowning in eyeshadow right now. So what I've decided to do is I am going to get the new Singe Beauty palette, but that's it. I'm not buying any more eyeshadow palettes this year because I won't have the bandwidth to want to swatch them, let alone put them on my eyeballs. So I'm just gonna see those sales in one ear out the other, keep it moving. When I remove all of those things, all I have left really are gifts. At least for the women in my life, I'm able to narrow down what I think I want for them, and then I just look for the sales. When it comes to the men in my life are particularly difficult, so I ask for help. I straight up ask for help. I've spent too many years buying men gifts that they don't want, wasting hundreds of dollars, so I'm not doing that. This year, my husband wanted a fragrance, so I'm getting him a fragrance and slippers, and this year, my dad's just gonna have to come up with something. So I like to get those gifts, but it really does help to get myself off of the Black Friday, Cyber Monday shopping spree, because that's what gives me a migraine about these sales. It's not buying gifts for other people. It's when I get caught up in buying things for myself. And I know for a fact that there is not a single thing that I need. And if there was, there are more sales. It doesn't end on Cyber Monday. Like, poof, the brands just give up. Like, there will be more sales. There'll be more sales next year. You know, this is not the end all be all, even though it feels that way. These brands are out here making it feel like the Armageddon of skincare and makeup, like you need to buy it now, and that is simply not true. So with all of that out of the way, now I'm going to proceed in conducting my autopsy of the Sephora sale. How did I do? Well, first up, I already made my returns. So I returned about $200 worth of products. At this point, I've already made a video talking about that, so I don't necessarily need to rehash that, but that does mean that everything left here is more or less winners. You know, I got rid of anything that I really wouldn't use already. So everything else was more or less a solid purchase. Now, granted, I'm still talking about at least 25 products here, so they're not all equally valuable to me. There are definitely some things that I think were more worth it than others, so I am going to start by talking about them. So these are all the things that I would recommend to other people without hesitation. Now, because I already did mini hauls with B-roll, I'm going to go ahead and link those videos in my playlist down in the description box, so you can visit those if you want to see any of these individual items talked about a little bit more thoroughly. But I am going to go through this kind of quickly. I'm going to include as much B-roll as I can, but my goal is really at this point just to get this video up and out before Thanksgiving. I have left myself almost no editing time. I mean, to do this proper, it would take me 10 hours to edit. I don't have 10 hours this go around, so I'm gonna keep this portion short and snappy, but definitely look at those videos if you want to see me talk about any of these items a little bit more in depth. All right, so number one, what item do I think sort of takes the cake as being the most useful item that I picked up during this entire sale? Editing Jean here, popping in just to say my actual number one purchase from this sale would be the Nars Light Reflecting foundation. I forgot because I had this out because I used all of these products today and I just forgot to put it back in the box, but I always get two shades. This time I got Patagonia and Mont Black, and I sort of Frankenstein a shade match. This one is going pretty well. I think Patagonia is probably the closest that Nars has to a shade for me, but I lighten it up with a little bit of Mont Black and it's working out. I remember this later in the video, but for now I wanted to definitely correct myself that my most used product here is definitely that Nars foundation. That prize is gonna have to go to the Westman Atelier, the little blush trio. And I say that even though the middle blush, Pop It, it's not really a shade that I'm gonna wear on a daily basis. I knew that going into it. I bought it anyway. But Mimi and Petal are. They are both gorgeous shades, and that is an addition to my makeup collection that has already proven itself to be a new holy grail. A close second to that would be me finally picking up the Charlotte Tilbury Matte Beauty Blush Wand in the shade Pillow Talk. This is a shade thing. I really love this shade. So between this set and this blush, these are my new everyday blushes. So from a value and a use case perspective, that definitely gets top spot. Number three, I'm gonna have to give it to the Huda Beauty Icy Nude. That's what I have on my eyes today. And this is a gorgeous palette. This is absolutely my ideal color story, and for that reason, this is a palette that I'm gonna get a lot of uses out of. One thing I wanted to mention about this, which is a thing for myself, not just for this palette, but for all of my eyeshadow palettes, is I have to be honest with how many looks I'm really going to want to repeat. So for me, the shade VVS and Iced Out are the two shimmers that I'm always going to want to reach back for. So that being said, the look I have on today is mostly the look I'm going to want to reach for. Now, for me personally, that is a look that I want to repeat very often, but I am not typically going to want to go silver or gold. So even though there are multiple ways that this palette can go, I know based on my preferences, I'm mostly going to want to do one look. I'm okay with that because it's a very neutral look and it's one that I'm gonna wanna use multiple times without ever getting sick of it. But I do think it's important to sort of look at eyeshadow palettes in a really practical way. And obviously this is a neutral palette, so it's gonna work for a lot of people. Now I would say if you are like on the fence between this and say the Natasha Denona I Need a Nude, I would probably say the Natasha Denona is still a safer bet because the formulas are just more consistent. Some of these are a little bit chunky. Some of the shimmers like VVS and Diamond Dew are already, I don't know, kind of falling apart and being a little bit too flaky for my preference. So the Natasha is a safer bet, but this is still a nice addition if you do really like these colors. Next, most worth it goes to my Charlotte Tilbury Film Star Bronze and Glow. I bought another mini because I am almost out of the one that I'm using, and it's my favorite bronzer. I mean, it's my favorite day-to-day bronzer. It doesn't do enough on its own in like the middle of summer, but if I was really looking to pare down my routine and I didn't want to take a separate step to bronze and contour, I would be perfectly happy just relying on that for both. It brings enough life back to my skin without ever looking orange or muddy or dirty or any of those things. So I use it along with bronzer and contour, but it could absolutely be used to replace that. I find it similar to the Makeup by Mario enhancer, the skin enhancer, which is that very, very light bronzer shade in a cream. I don't prefer relying on a cream for day to day because I don't know. I just personally feel like creams take slightly more effort, so I'm more likely to reach for a powder, but I do sort of feel like this is the powder version of that. Next up is going to be my Patrick Ta Major Dimension 3. I had been looking at this ever since it came out. Last year, I went with the Makeup by Mario matte palette instead of this one. They both came out around the same time, and that one had a gray and had more cool tone. I like the colors in that one better. Frankly, I still like the colors in the Makeup by Mario better, but I don't like the formula. I find that it just blends away and looks patchy. I really used to try to make excuses for it, but I really don't like his eyeshadow formula, even the ethereal eyes. So to me, the Patrick Ta matte formula is way better. The reason I didn't purchase this was because I have Major Dimension 1 and 2. Major Dimension 2 got moldy on me, so I had to get rid of that palette. I will not put that on my eyes, even though only a few of the shades were affected. I feel like the whole palette is garbage, so I won't put that on my eyes. But Major Dimension 1 was problem-free. I've had that for a long time now and there's no mold, so I do still use that. And based on my experience there, I really like the formula, but the colors of those mattes seemed too similar to this to warrant me having both. So for that reason, I held off. In the meantime, I was using the Natasha Denona I Need a Nude, the gray brown shades. I was using that to build out my looks when I would use my single shadow shimmers. That was great. I still prefer that palette to set up my eye looks. However, I have hit pan on 2 of the shadows already, and I'm running out of it quickly. So I did sort of need a backup. I didn't want to buy a whole nother I Need a Nude, so I went with this instead, mostly for the cool tone row. So if you see here, the top row is warm and the bottom row is more cool tone. That's really the row that I bought this palette for. So, you know, we're talking like 4 shades. Is that worth $70? I don't know. That's a stretch. I did also used to use the Viseart mattes for the same reason. I own that palette already, so I could have gone back there, but frankly, I wanted something new. I do really like this formula, so for me, this palette is worth it. I've used it a bunch already. Anytime I really want to highlight a single shadow shimmer and I want it to pop against a neutral background, this palette has been great for that, but it's not going to be worth it for everyone. Like if I was recommending to somebody else who maybe wasn't as picky as I am, I would say the Viseart Neutral Mattes, like that's a more versatile palette at a better price point. So I don't feel like I needed this, but I do think I will get a lot of use out of it One thing I thought was interesting was the lighter shades are actually darker on my skin than they look in the pan. So I did want to mention that. If you have really fair skin, if you are my shade or lighter and you're looking at some of the lighter shades, I would keep in mind that this does pull a little deeper than it looks. So if I were helping somebody decide between this and the Viseart, I would also bring up skin tone because I do think that this pulled darker than I expected it to. Okay, next up, and honestly, this could have gone higher on the list. I put it where I did only because of the absurd amount of lip products that I have going on right now. But next, I have the Giorgio Armani in 07, the Prismaglass lip gloss. This is the nude one. It's just gorgeous. It's very dimensional. There's nothing plumping in it, but it gives your lips a fuller look just because of the fine-tuned shimmers that it has going on. It's stunning, and the formula is fabulous. Unlike a lot of my other lip glosses that are beautiful but don't necessarily have the best formula, this has both. This is beautiful and it's a stunning formula. I also want to say that for nude, this works really well for me because this has more of a pinky base and it doesn't wash me out. I do not look good with washed out lips. It's not a good look for me. So I always have to stick with something that is either truly clear or has a little bit more of a base or rosy base, and this has that. So this is my absolute favorite lip gloss right now, and I only really took a chance on it because of this sale, so I'm really, really grateful that I did that. After that, I'm going to put my Hourglass Dim Light. This is the powder that I use for underneath my eyes. It does a really good job not brightening. I don't like to brighten my under eyes because I think it brings more attention to the area and makes my under eyes look worse. So this being more of a peachy, darker shade, it doesn't darken my under eyes because I certainly don't want to do that either. I'm not over here trying to darken my under eyes, but I just want them to be as invisible as humanly possible. So I feel like this really gets me there. It doesn't dry my skin out, but it does enough to dull the shine. Next, I'll put my Gucci bronzer. I really love the shade of this. I have it now in 01. I used to have 02, but that shade absolutely did not work for me. It looked muddy and patchy. It reminds me of the description of the NYX butter bronzers. I actually haven't tried those, but when I hear people describe them, it sounds similar to this. It's like a hydrating formula without being like full of mica or anything else that would make it glowy, which is great for me, anybody with dry skin. I appreciate powders that aren't drying, but when it comes to a bronzer, sometimes that can make it look dirty or muddy or not blend well with other products. So I have to use a light hand with this, but because I like the color so much, I am really glad that I finally picked it up. I don't think this is a must-have. I think if I was recommending bronzer to somebody else, I would say that the Pat McGrath bronzer formula is way better than this. If you have a good color in that, I personally like Nude Honey. But if there's a color in that range that really speaks to you, I think Pat McGrath all day long. This is more annoying to work with, but having the rosier undertone, it's just, at the end of the day, it is worth it to me. So I am glad that I have this. Definitely a worth it for the shade type of product. All right, so now we're getting to the bottom of the barrel. So my next most worth it product, I think I'm gonna go ahead and hand it to the Sarah Creal. I got the lip balm. This is just for healing your lips. This is not really for the look it gives because it's very subtle and I'm not sure it looks any different from any other lip balm, but I do find it soothing. A lot of times during the winter, my lips become painful, quite frankly, dry, but also they crack and it hurts. So I like having something that has a little bit more going on in the formula that's not going to just put a band-aid on it, like sort of like a Vaseline layer to protect me from the elements, yes. And in theory, having that protection allows your lips to just heal on their own, but I feel like my lips need a little bit something extra to promote that healing. It's early days, but I do think that this provides that, and it's a very comfortable formula. It's very thin. So even though it's tenacious and it grips on your lips and it stays put, it does that while also being thin and inoffensive. So you can eat and drink and it's not going to like disrupt anything else you have going on. It's just a nice easygoing formula. I do really like it. I have to say, I'm really happy with everything I've tried from Sarah Creal. If we get another Sephora coupon, I'm going to go ahead and repurchase the concealer in the correct shade if it is in stock because I liked it that much. Even though it didn't beat out my Kosas and my Kulfi, I am happy that I got to try it, and nothing has actually been as good as those two things for me, so the Sarah Creal impressed me. I'm excited to see what else they come out with. After that, I'm going to go ahead and put my Ami Collet, the Midnight Kiss Duo. This is the gold and silver shimmer. These are beautiful to look at, and I think that they would make a nice gift because they are so pretty to look at. But I have to say, I don't love the formula. When I put this on as a topper, like yesterday, I wore this as a topper over lipstick. It was fine, and it wasn't too sticky that it was annoying. But it is sticky. So, you know, you could look at that as being tenacious and it stays put. It wears for a longer time. I do appreciate that. But if I were to wear my hair down or go outside, especially in the wind, wearing my hair down, like I would be miserable. So I can't say that I think it's a flawless formula, but I do like it. You know, I am going to use these. I'm certainly going to use them. I don't regret buying them. I'm not going to return them. I just can't sit here and say they're perfect because they really aren't for me. As sort of an afterthought, I picked up Burberry Goddess because I got a sample of it recently and I thought it was pretty. That's neither here nor there. I don't regret getting it, but I do like Commodity Milk and Commodity Gold better. I like a gourmand, so if you like a gourmand, vanilla, that's your thing. I still recommend trying Commodity. Just personal preference though. And now I'm almost at the end. So I guess the second to last would be I threw in 2 Sephora lipsticks because during this sale, I always throw in 1 or 2 of these lipsticks because I really struggle finding decent lipstick shades. I hate almost everything, especially if it pulls orange or peach. I just don't think that's a good look for me. And I think it's really hard picking lip colors online. I think the swatches, it's incredibly difficult to tell what they're actually going to look on top of my lips. Because it's always a stab in the dark, I do appreciate the Sephora shades because they are, you know, super cheap and the formula is just as good as my high-end lipsticks, so it's less of a risk overall. I got shade 20 and shade 7. Neither of them are terrible, neither of them are great. I have 07 on today, but you know, I didn't need either of these, but I'm not mad. It's definitely a nice way to experiment with shades. Alright, and finally, the thing I think is last on my list in terms of being worth it would be this Sephora Favorites Bold and Blushing kit. It came with a Lawless blush, and I'm giving that as a gift. So this was still worth it for me because I own the Lawless blush. I love that blush, and I'm going to give it to my mom for Christmas. So I'm glad that I got this set for that. There was nothing else in this kit that was that exciting for me to ever think that this was worth purchasing again. If I were to do it all over again, I would just get the blush and call it a day. But, you know, the Summer Fridays, the Pat McGrath, the Patrick Ta, those are all decent lip products, so I just ended up keeping it, but wouldn't necessarily recommend that unless it was like deeply discounted. And finally, the product that I might return is this Kosas Blush. I got this in Swoon, and for me, it's a shade thing. I actually really enjoyed this formula. I thought it looked blurring, and I have textured skin, so I'm here for all of the blur, but it was described as being a pinky brown mauve, and I didn't think it was brown or very neutral at all. I felt like it pulled like really, really pink, almost like a raspberry shade. So I don't know. I mean, I've definitely heard people say that all of these blushes are slightly different, but to me anyway, it looked nothing like the swatches. I didn't think it had anything even remotely in common with the swatches online, so it was really difficult to even choose a color. So I don't know. I think I am going to return this. If I can get to the store within a reasonable amount of time, I'm definitely going to return that because that's not a color I'm going to use. These blushes went 40% off at Urban Outfitters, so I actually got a different shade at Urban Outfitters, and I'll see how that goes, but at least for the one I picked up, I can vouch for the formula, but I think the shades are a little bit tricky. I would absolutely recommend picking those up in person if you can. And that is everything. We are down to what I bought as gifts. So if you're related to me, turn this video off now. But if not, we're going to go ahead and talk about what I bought for my mother and my sister for Christmas. This isn't their full gift, but this is part of it. So for my mom, I got her a YSL mini clutch. I already bought her Store Dolls and she loves it. So I went ahead and got her shade 400 in Babylon Rose because she's way more cool tone than I am. So I really thought this pinky undertone would work really well on her. I also got her a Sarah Creal The Adults Are Talking Lip Balm and the Sarah Creal Back of the Cab mascara. She just likes trying new mascaras, so I don't really know if this is going to work for her. It's tubing, and I don't really think she's a fan, but I figured if she's going to try a tubing mascara, it might as well be a luxury one, so that way she'll get a good idea if she thinks it's worth it or not. I don't know, that was sort of a gamble, but I think the other two items are safe. And then for my sister, I got her an Armani Prisma glass, the same color I got, the Nude Glow, and I got her an accompanying Armani eye tint. This is the new shade 67 Shimmer. After I picked this up, these actually went on sale at Nordstrom's for $20 a piece. So I did run back and I got another one for my mom and another one for me. So I didn't buy that from Sephora, but if they're still around, I definitely recommend these. I don't usually like liquid eyeshadows because I just really like the way powder performs better, but these are impactful. If you like an ethereal shimmer, I highly recommend 67S, which is just called Sparkle, along with the shade that's called Frost, because both of those leave behind a stunning shimmer. They're very light though. So if you're like here for high impact the way I am, I don't think these are a must-have. Like, I don't think I absolutely needed this in my collection, but I am happy to have it because I can use it with powder. One of the reasons I often don't reach for my liquid shadows is they don't play well with powder and they want to be used by themselves and as one and done, and I'm not a one and done girl. I can do a simple eye look, but I need a little bit of dimension to be satisfied, so this allows me to do that. I can still set my look up with something like the Patrick top, but then I can use this on my inner corner and center of my eyelid, and it just adds a pop of sparkle that is really highly refined and beautiful. So I really think my sister's going to enjoy this little set from Armani. And last but not least, I got a couple of the Touchland Glow Mists because, yeah, it's too much to spend on a hand sanitizer, but especially this time of year, I wanted something that wasn't going to dry my skin out. These claim not to do that, so I figured, why not? Everybody's going to get a hand sanitizer this year for Christmas. So that is everything. Now, quickly, I'm going to talk about the things I returned. So just like I was talking about with the Armani that can be layered with powder, I returned the Kulfi Zari eyes because it really needed to be worn on its own. Anytime I wore it with powder, it just got really thick and chunky and it just wasn't a cute look. In a future video, I might talk a little bit more about that and show the B-roll and exactly what I mean, because I did take footage of me putting on to illustrate that, but long story short, it just didn't look the best layered with anything else. You know, I could get away with a tiny bit of bronzer in my crease, but I couldn't use anything beyond that, and that just wasn't going to work for me. So as stunning as it was, especially on its own, it just wasn't something I was personally going to use. So I got rid of that. I got rid of the Sarah Creal concealer because it was just a little bit too dark, and it worked. The color worked all over my face as a foundation, but it was just a hair too shiny. And it was a shine that could not be taken care of with powder. It wasn't like an oily shine. It was like a silicone-y shine, which was fine under the eyes, but all over it was just a little bit too much to wear it as a foundation. So I knew I wasn't going to keep it for that. So I absolutely had to return it. I got it in shade 3. What I really needed was shade 1. We'll see if I can work that out by the end of the year, but regardless, in the future, I would absolutely consider getting that again. Then I returned the Dior foundation stick. Now, I did really like it. It was the best foundation stick for my dry skin that I've ever tried, but it just wasn't quite there. You know, right now my holy grail foundations are the Nars Light Reflecting and the Chanel #1. I should say here that I totally forgot to include the Nars foundation because I kept all of my items in boxes for review purposes, and that one didn't make it back in my box. So that would be #1. That is a non-negotiable. Every sale I pick up a new Nars Light Reflecting foundation. That kind of goes without saying. That's always my best purchase because I use it every single day. But regardless, it didn't beat those and it didn't even come close. So I just was never going to want to reach for it. I don't travel enough that I'm ever going to need a stick foundation just for traveling purposes. So it didn't make sense to keep a $50 foundation that I wasn't totally in love with. That being said, I think it's going to work for a lot of people. I think if you have fewer things to cover than I do, I think it could work really beautifully. And I think that's why most people absolutely love it. I also returned my Hourglass blush, and part of that was the packaging. My packaging worked at first. But after having it for like a week, it was practically unusable, and like maybe I could have repotted it or fixed it, but I didn't like the blush enough. It didn't stand out enough. It was glowy and it did have that going for it. I can't say that I hated the finish. It just didn't stand out enough. The color or the formula didn't stand out enough in my collection to warrant keeping it with flawed packaging. So I returned that. And then finally, I returned the Patrick Ta Duo and talked to my team. I know from watching several other reviews on those duos that I got the worst one. Like I got the dullest one, but even if I didn't, they don't beat the shadows I have. I have the same colors. The colors were unremarkable, and I have the same colors in better formulas already in my collection, so none of those would have been worth it for me. So that is it. That is everything. That is my full haul. Right now on the screen, I'll pop up my total. So I'll pop up the total number of products I got, the total price, and then underneath that, I'm going to subtract my gifts because those don't really count towards my personal purchases. And there were some gifts that I left out, but I'll subtract those, and then finally I'll subtract everything I returned. So my final grand total . And yeah, I don't honestly feel bad. Most of these things were on my loves list for over a year, so I didn't really experiment with a lot of new products this go around. I do like to do that during the Sephora sale because of the easy return policy, but I didn't really feel the need to experiment that much. Most of these are tried and true, and most of these were good purchases. So although nothing was all that exciting, I sort of feel like I had a safe sale. So no big risks, no big rewards. Everything was just good. Makeup these days is very good. So there's not usually a ton to complain about, but I hope this was useful. If there's anything you're needing right now, anything that's left on your list, it's good to keep in mind, my rule of thumb is if I get it from Sephora, I can return it. If I get it almost anywhere else, I will not return it. So I do look at that as like a returnable versus a final sale. Even if it's not a final sale, I'm not going to send something back through the mail. So if I take a risk, it's going to be at Sephora. So I would keep that in mind when we come to the 20% off coupon, the 25% coupon, stuff like that. Anything else, I think you're going to get a better deal if you go through the brand. And every brand is on sale right now. So I don't think you need to worry about strategy beyond something crazy. Like when Urban Outfitters has Kosas for 40% off, there are definitely a few exceptions when things are really heavily discounted. But for the most part, the brand themselves are going to have the best deal. So I do hope that that helps simplify things at least a little bit. And just remember, few things are guaranteed in this life, but another sale is definitely one of them. So don't drive yourself crazy during Black Friday. I hope you have an absolutely wonderful Thanksgiving, whether that is with friends or with family. I hope you are taking care of yourself right now. Oh, next up is going to be my eyeshadow palette ranking. That's going to be a bit of a doozy, but I'm looking forward to it because I really love eyeshadow. My little monsters always like to play as soon as I turn the camera on, so I apologize if that was distracting. I know this entire video was kind of erratic, but my next several will be shorter and I will have a lot more time to edit. So I appreciate your patience and I hope this was still helpful. I love you so much and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.